Let's go! The book is here. Tales from the Pizzaplex #1. Lally's Game. It is here. It's time to read this thing. I've heard it's really good. I've also heard it come from Stitchline Games, but I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We'll see when we read it. Now won't we? But today's video is only going to be the summary for the first story, not Lally's Game, which is weird. Same goes for Haps too, the second book. The second story is the title story, which is weird. Lally's Game is the second story. Very strange, but whatever. Let's go! That's right, guys. The first Tales from the Pizzaplex book, Lally's Game, has finally come out. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a summary on the first story of the book. Strangely, the first story isn't Lally's Game, but Frailty. Today will be the first summary that I'm going to be making on this book, and I'll be doing at least 7 total videos on this book, and this will be the first, the summary for Frailty. The next will be the Lally's Game summary, and the one after that will be Under Construction summary, which I've heard is the weirdest story in all of FNaF, which I don't know how that's possible. But the last summary will be on the epilogue, and after all 4 stories are done, I'll be doing a theory on every idea I get from the book, and a theory discussion with some of my friends after that. However, that theory discussion might happen on a live stream, but we'll see. And finally, I will do a video ranking all 3 stories in the epilogue. There is a strong possibility that I will do more videos as time goes on, but I will do the same thing every time a new Tales book comes out. Assuming there are 11 books in Tales, that means there will be at least 77 Tales from the Pizzaplex videos, not counting news videos about future covers or reveals about the book. That's a lot, so I think it's time that we get started with Frailty. Let's go! The story begins with 2 EMTs named Jack and Dave trying to revive a teenage boy dying on the road. But the kid didn't make it, so they covered him with a tarp. Jack heard a sound come from behind them, and he thought maybe someone was there, but he didn't see anyone. They returned to the ambulance, and an officer named Officer Manor was there, bummed that the kid didn't make it. He also got bad vibes from the fact that this was all happening near a cemetery. Suddenly, Jack noticed a dark and slim figure leaning over the body, holding what looked to be a knife. He yelled for whoever it was to get away from the kid's body. Something was swinging in the figure's hand. It got up and ran away behind bushes. Officer Manor asked what it was, and Jack said it looked like another kid, possibly a girl. Jack thought maybe he was just imagining things because his shift had been really long and he needed sleep. But when he went over to the kid's body, he was alive. Jack believed it to be a miracle. Then we cut to our main character, Jessica, mopping the floor in the hospital she works at. She heard staff members murmuring around her, and she covered her face with her hair so as to not be seen. Jessica knew all of the kids in this wing of the hospital. She could even overhear a conversation between a kid named Brian and his parents. Excited for him to get out of the hospital so that they could take him to Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. That's the only mention of the Pizzaplex in this entire story. Yeah, whatever. But then Brian's mom noticed strange silver flakes all over Brian's body. She was concerned, but Brian's dad assured her there was a perfectly good explanation. A nurse named Nurse Macy came out and admitted she didn't know what it was, but she got it off him and said that she'd get people to sweep it up after. Jessica overhears other people talking to Nurse Macy about how strange Jessica is. One guy describes her as being alive but not living. Nurse Macy tells this Colin guy that he was probably at an awkward stage at 14 too, so that means Jessica is 14, probably just working here as a part-time job. Suddenly a tin can fell, and Nurse Macy asked Jessica to throw it away, and also said that she seems nice and is a big help around here. She says that Jessica probably helps out at home a lot, and Jessica just nods and turns away. On her break, Jessica went into the hospital chapel, which was empty. She liked it empty because she had it all to herself. She sat down and took a look at the heart-shaped pendant that she wore around her neck. It used to be a whole heart, but now it was getting thin, and it was more like a crescent moon shape now, with rough scratches on one side of it. When she looks at it, she thought that it was nearly finished. That's very interesting, and we'll get to that in a sec. She then prayed for God to let her right her wrongs, and to do what's right, by helping people who are sick. The priest, Father Jeremiah, walked in and asked what her name was, and if there was anything he could help her with. He said she looked pale, and asked if she needed water or food or to rest or anything. Jessica said she was fine, and she thought about this job. She hoped she had been doing it well because the job gave her the opportunity to get closer to people who needed her help. Yesterday she heard the car crash and she was able to save the boy, but she almost got caught and she didn't want that. Father Jeremiah also told Jessica that if she ever needed to talk to someone, he was here almost every day. He also complimented her pendant. After she left, she looked at herself in the mirror and thought to herself, some people might have thought she was pretty, but she was getting more and more frail every day, and every time she scraped the pendant. It was actually stated that being lovely was once all she ever wanted. This is very interesting because it reminds me a lot of the wish from To Be Beautiful. The wish, well, to be beautiful. Then she put some makeup on and went back to work. She went to a new patient's room, a little boy with brown hair, and he held a stuffed green elephant in his arms. She looked around and walked into the room. Then she grabbed her pendant and pulled out a knife. She began scraping her pendant, and little silver flakes fell onto the boy as she did. As she scraped, her chest got tighter, and her breathing and heartbeat slowed. The boy woke up and asked if she was an angel, but she said she wasn't and got him to go back to sleep pretty quickly. As Jessica was leaving the room, a spring fell onto the ground as she felt like she was growing weaker. She picked up the spring and left the room to continue working. Then we cut to Jessica at school. She didn't really know why she still went to school because it reminded her of all the people her age who were actually normal. Everyone thought of Jessica as the creepy girl. In class, people behind her were making fun of her, saying there was something wrong with her, that she never spoke. They said that she was like a mannequin and she creeps around the graveyard like a zombie. The girls behind her threw an eraser at her head, and they got in trouble for it. Their teacher, whose name I don't know how to pronounce, got mad at her. How do you say this name? Willoughby? I'll just say Willoughby, because, I don't know how else to pronounce it. I think that, I'll just say Willoughby. So yeah, Mrs. Willoughby got mad at them for laughing and disturbing the class. The eraser landed next to a new kid named Robert. He threw the eraser back at the girls. Then Mrs. Willoughby asked everyone to get partnered up, and Robert got up and asked Jessica if she wanted to be his partner. Jessica hadn't been listening, but she said yes because she knew she had to have a partner, and it wasn't very common for someone to want to speak with her, so this was probably her only chance. He had just transferred to the school, and he was excited for the new assignment. They had to build a robot. One day after school, Jessica waited at the courtyard for Robert. They were going to work on the robot there. They were going to make a mini rolling robot that carried items on its back and would be controlled with a remote. They had to have the tray lift up and down. Robert had taken apart an old remote control car and found stuff they could use to make their bot work. Robert suggested they go to the junkyard to find components for the bot, but Jessica shuddered and said that she had to go to work. Robert said that they could go another day, but Jessica again said no. It seems like she's specifically afraid to go to the junkyard. Interestingly, the junkyard is where Sarah found Eleanor in To Be Beautiful. Jessica left, and she thought that if she let herself, she might start to like Robert, but she couldn't let herself because of what her life had become. Her life had changed when she made one bad decision, and now her sanctuary was at the cemetery. She lived every day just trying to make up for the bad mistake she made. So she went to this mausoleum structure in the cemetery and laid down her sleeping bag. This was where she lived. She had a duffel bag full of everything that she had. The only thing she has from her old life had been a white rabbit's foot on a chain. This was a reminder of who she was and who she would never be again. A white rabbit's foot, huh? Sounds like Jessica is connected to Vanny in some way. Then we cut to Jessica back at work, and although she just has to move a mop really slowly, she's really tired, and I kinda already got the idea as to why, because of To Be Beautiful. Hopefully you guys get it by now, but I won't spoil it until it's actually revealed in the story. Nurse Macy greets Jessica and tells her that almost all of their patients are doing better, which is of course because of Jessica and the pendant. She tells Jessica that in a job like this, you have to take the wins when you can get them, and Jessica remembers that. Nurse Macy walks toward another patient and notices a fork in the floor, and she finds it weird that stuff like this keeps showing up, including the weird flakes. Jessica thinks she messed up because she missed another one, whatever that means, kinda weird. I think you could probably guess what's going on by now. Jessica then notices a new patient, a girl with red hair and freckles, about Jessica's age. She says her name is April. She greets Jessica and asks why she works here. Jessica thinks to herself that it's because she wants to help sick people, but she tells April that it's just because it's a job. Jessica says she's got to get back to work. April says she should stop by sometime, and Jessica nods as she continues to work. Then we cut back to Jessica at school, and Robert tells her all the stuff that he salvaged from the junkyard. Jessica sits still, not really reacting to all this stuff, and Robert comments on it, and Jessica just tells him that this stuff will work fine. Robert says that they should get started and calls her Jess, which gave Jessica Vietnam flashbacks. Mrs. Willoughby came by and said their robots seemed to be coming together and that they should start building it in the next few days. When she left, Robert began taking the objects out of the box. Jessica hesitated to help, but she was kind of just frozen. But she ended up picking a piece of metal up and just to examine it. Then we cut to Nurse Macy at the hospital with the patient named Billy, the kid who had thought Jessica was an angel before. Nurse Macy told him he was doing well, and he had asked Nurse Macy if he would see the angel again. Nurse Macy was confused, but Billy told her that an angel had come to visit her a few nights ago. As Billy shifted in bed, Nurse Macy noticed more silver flakes on his covers, and she dusted them off of him. Suddenly, Nurse Macy heard a clatter come from outside the room, and she found a piece of a car muffler outside the door. She asked Jessica if she'd seen anyone drop this, to which she said she didn't see anyone. Nurse Macy asks her to pick them up, and she asks if the other nurses in the hospital if they'd seen any pieces of scrap metal around, and they hadn't. It had only been in the children's wing, because that's where Jessica worked. Nurse Macy decided to look around the children's wing and found old greasy bolts on the floor. She picked it up and kept looking. She found a rusted can too and put the stuff in the trash. She found that she had made it to the hospital chapel and decided to check inside it to see if whoever was doing this had been inside. Inside the chapel, she sees Father Jeremiah, and she explains the situation to him. She also asks him to visit April and pray for her. Jeremiah tells her that he will do that, and he also asks how Jessica is. He tells her that Jessica is a nice girl, but worries for her as she seems so frail and quiet. As she's leaving, Nurse Macy finds a rusty lock on the floor. Then we cut to Jessica and Robert working on the mini-bot in Robert's dad's workshop. Robert says they need to come up with a name for the robot, and Jessica suggests Minibot 5000, and Robert says it's not very original. Jessica says that some robots in general aren't original, and just made from boring old junkyard scraps. Then Jessica gets sad. Why? Well, because that perfectly describes her. Only difference is that she's a human made from boring old junkyard scraps. Do you get it yet? Anyway, Robert's mom comes in with brownies, and Jessica is hesitant to try one, but when she does, they taste delicious. I'm getting hungry now. Robert asks what Jessica's family is like, but she says that she doesn't like sharing. Robert thinks that's okay because other girls just talk about themselves all the time, but Jessica doesn't. Robert doesn't think Jessica is weird, and then Robert asks Jessica to prom. Oh jeez, my heart stopped when reading that. How do people just ask people out so easily? I've never been able to. I mean, Robert asks her, and she's hesitant. She doesn't know whether to say yes or not, because she's not normal. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Anyway, at work later, Jessica rushes to the hospital chapel. She left Robert's house quickly. She told him that she would go see if she could get the night off, and she would let him know. She went to the chapel for guidance. She questioned if she could live her life normally. She questioned if she had to continue with her plan, or if she could stop and just live. She didn't know what to do, and she asked Father Jeremiah for advice. She feels like she can't let herself live because she doesn't deserve a good life because of the horrible choice that she made in the past when she gave up everything. Father Jeremiah says that helping other people is a gift, but sometimes you need to help yourself to balance the scales. As Jessica leaves, Father Jeremiah notices some kind of gear on the floor, which he finds odd. Then Jessica goes to April's room. April has cancer, and she can't really do the things her friends can anymore. She can only do it in her imagination. She asks Jessica to tell her about her life. Jessica tells her all of the stuff about Robert and maybe going to the prom, and April says that she hopes she can go to the prom one day. And Jessica tells her that she will. April told Jessica about what her perfect prom night would be like, and Jessica feels guilty. She knows she can help April, but she doesn't know if she should. She doesn't know if she should live her life like Father Jeremiah said, or continue with her plan. She wants to help April, and she knows she can, but she doesn't know if she should for her own sake. After that, we cut to Jessica and Robert doing a test run on the Minibot 5000. Robert decided to choose Jessica's name idea, and even if he didn't think it was that original. They decided to do the test run at the cemetery because it was peaceful there. No one would bother them there. The test run went well, besides a wheel falling off, but that was easy enough to fix. The trial was successful. After that, Jessica told Robert that she would go to the prom with him. Good for them. Maybe not really. Anyway, then we get a pretty simple scene where Jessica is confused at work. She doesn't know what to do about a dress for prom. Nurse Macy asks Jessica if she's okay, and Jessica tells her she's going to prom and she needs help with the dress. Nurse Macy offers to help her. And then later they go to a store and Jessica tries on a bunch of different dresses, and she tries one on that they both really like, and they get matching shoes as well. A sales lady shows up and tells Nurse Macy that her daughter looks great in the dress. Nurse Macy doesn't correct her, and Jessica wonders why, but guesses that it's just because sometimes explaining was too much work. Jessica kept looking at herself, and she thought prom was going to be great. A week later, Nurse Macy hadn't heard back from Jessica, so she decided to figure out what was going on with her. She tracked down Jessica's address, but when she got there, the woman who opened the door knew no one named Jessica. Nurse Macy now had no idea what to do or where Jessica could be. Then we cut to Jessica in total darkness. She was wearing her prom dress, but she couldn't understand why. She wondered if she could have died in her sleep and if this was the afterlife, but then she realized that she couldn't have died because the remnant pendant prevented her from dying. She heard a creaking sound and asked if anyone was there. She began hearing more creaking around her. It was the sound of metal against metal. She heard them all around, but she heard it behind her, and she ran forward. The metal footsteps stomped behind her quickly. She felt something grip her arms, and her arms were ripped from her shoulders. Blood rushes down her body, and then she feels something pull her pendant away. Then she woke up, and it was just a nightmare. The next day at school was the day they had to present their bots to the class. As other classmates were presenting, Jessica and Robert were nervous. They knew anything could go wrong at any time, so Jessica was worried something would go wrong now. She could tell Robert was nervous, so she gave him her lucky rabbit foot for some reason, and then he gave her the bracelet that he always wore. Then it was time for them to present. The girl behind them insulted them, but they just ignored them. The presentation ended up going well. Robert gave Jessica the control for the demonstration, and all eyes were on her for the applause, and Robert was okay with that. After the presentation, a girl named Tina came up to Jessica and told her the bot was cool and that maybe they could work together next time. Jessica was happy that a lot more people were starting to like her. Everything was changing, but she liked the changes, and that scared her. Then we cut to after school before prom. Jessica went to visit April and see how she was doing, and April had a high fever and nothing was working to bring it down. Nurse Macy noticed Jessica and asked her if the address she had listed for the hospital was an old one, and Jessica panicked. But just then, an alert went off in April's room. Jessica wondered to herself if she was making the right choice giving to herself. She went to the chapel to ask Father Jeremiah for guidance, but he was talking to another man. Jessica sat down and asked her pendant for a sign because she needed guidance. No sign came. She went to the prom. Some of the girls who normally made fun of her just stared at her, probably shocked that she was here and had a date. But then she and Robert went to dance, and they told each other that they really liked each other, and Robert leaned in to kiss her. Yeah, cool. But then when he did that, dark grease ended up on Robert's face, on his lips. Dirty grease from metal. Robert was disgusted, and Jessica staggered backward and bumped into someone. People stopped dancing to look at Jessica. She finally realized that she had made the wrong choice. She shouldn't have gone to prom. She was horrified at what had just happened, and all she could do was run. Then we cut to Nurse Macy still at the hospital, and she was worried about both April and Jessica. She decided enough was enough, and tomorrow she would ask Jessica what was going on with her. Just then, Jessica rushed into the hospital. She still had on her prom dress, but she looked pale, and dark liquid had been streaked down her face. As she ran into April's room, pieces of scrap metal trailed behind her. Jessica blocked the door, and Nurse Macy could see through the window in the door that Jessica was holding her pendant and scratching pieces off of it with a knife. A security guard came, but he couldn't get the door open. Colin, the dude from the beginning of the story, and the security guard did manage to get the door open to April's room, but when they did, Jessica was nowhere to be seen. But a gross pile of scrap metal covered in grease was on the floor. Everyone was bewildered as to how Jessica could have vanished. Father Jeremiah walked into the room and looked at the pile of scrap metal quietly and sadly. He did his cross and began to pray. Unlike everyone else, Father Jeremiah understood what had happened to Jessica. Just then, April's heart monitor leveled back into a healthy and strong rhythm, right as the story ends. As the first story of Tales from the Pizzaplex, I think this turned out to be a great story, but there were a couple of interesting things about the story that I think are worth noting. When Robert suggested going to the junkyard to find stuff for the robot, Jessica really didn't want to go there. As I said in To Be Beautiful, Sarah finds Eleanor in the junkyard. This, among other things, makes it clear that Jessica is actually one of Eleanor's victims. In To Be Beautiful, Sarah wishes to be beautiful. That's where the story gets its name from, obviously. This is interesting because Jessica is said to be really pretty, and she says that there was a time when that was all she wanted, implying there was a time when she wasn't. She always thinks back to a mistake that she made, and given the context, it seems like she wished for the same thing Sarah wished for. Jessica wishes to be beautiful, and that is the mistake she made. Eleanor gives Jessica the remnant pendant just like she gave Sarah, and both Sarah and Jessica are made of scrap metal. Jessica keeps getting more and more frail because whenever she scratches pieces off the pendant, there's less remnant keeping her alive. The remnant in the pendant is what's keeping her alive despite being made of scrap metal. It also keeps what she is a secret, except when the pieces of scrap metal fall off her, just like what happens throughout the story. It's also similar to what Eleanor's does to the Afton amalgamation. When she leaves it, the parts that were in an upright position fall apart, just like what happens to Jessica at the end of the story. The most interesting thing about this story, in my opinion, though, is something that you may not have thought twice about. A few times in the story, Jessica talks to her pendant for guidance. At the end of the final Fazzer Frights epilogue, Larson walks away from Talbert's house with the pendant in his hand, and it starts singing, implying that this remnant was made from a spirit of someone who died. I like to think it was Talbert's wife, who died before the events of the epilogues. This could be why he was so afraid to lose Rennell, because then he would have nothing left. So he used an object that his wife possessed and turned it into a pendant for Rennell. But Eleanor just gives these pendants to all her victims, so where does she get the remnant from to do that? I think it's possible she gets the remnant from people she has killed. Maybe that's why Jessica speaks to the pendant, because maybe it was someone Jessica knew who Eleanor killed. But the final question is, does this story prove Stitchline games? Not really. I've already established that I already believe Eleanor to be in the games whether Stitchline games is true or not. So this story just confirming that Eleanor is in the games doesn't really mean the Stitchline is too. But I will expand on that in my theory video that I'll make after I've read all the stories. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Let me know in the comments what you think about this story, and stay tuned for all my other summaries and other videos that I will make about this book. The next video will be a summary of the title story, Lally's Game, so I'll see you all there.